Welcome to Crimson Guitars. This is the second and final part of a very short series looking at a top-end Parker electric guitar. Now, I hope that you watched the first video where I wanted to say pulled out the frets, but basically the frets were delaminated from the fretboard and then glued back in place. Parkers have an issue. They have a tangless fret that's made out of stainless steel, which they glue onto the composite or carbon fiber fretboard. I still haven't checked which one of the two it is. Anyhow, so they glue these frets on, and a decade later, the client opens up the guitar case and finds one or two frets free floating in the case, hopefully not scratching the guitar. And this client had that happen. A local repairman glued on 2 or 3, and he sent it to me saying, look, can you just remove all of the frets and re-glue them with new glue and make so that hopefully it doesn't happen to him when he needs it for a gig or something like that. We've done that. Watch the other video. Now I am going to show you the leveling and crowning process. And then we'll get the guitar strung up and sent back home. The first thing you do is get a notched straight edge, preferably one made by us at Crimson Guitars, and use it to check in between the strings. Now this neck is not perfectly flat to start with, and I need to adjust the truss rod to make it flat. It's got this strange sideways mounted truss rod. And you need a light behind you to so you can see any gap. First of all, you get some fine line tape and put it along the side of the fretboard, and we want this going right up to the bottom of the fret end. Now, these fret ends are already perfectly polished and shaped and comfortable and great, and I've managed to glue them back in the right place. Once the thin strips of tape are down the edge, then we can start masking off the fretboard. Now, I always put several layers of masking tape over the nut, because your nut is, well, it's high, and as you go along with your fret leveler, you're probably going to bump it, and if you've got the tape there, it softens the blow a little bit. So, a couple of layers of masking tape right up to the edge of the fret, and then let's do it like this. I cut it off. I don't want loads of masking tape go around the back of the neck. That makes life difficult. Use your thumbnail to push it up against the fret, and then at a 45-degree angle, the tip of your scalpel is just cutting just underneath the fret. If you do it straight on like that, you're going to cut down into your fretboard and it's going to be visible. You can then use the offcuts further up the neck. What I've started doing now as well, which is new, instead of going back and recutting a size, custom size to fit alongside each fret as your second layer, I now go with the thin stuff, and that's much easier than going through the palaver of cutting a thick piece to cover the whole thing. Where the dangerous section is next to the frets, and you can even put 2 or 3 layers of this up on there and be all right. So onwards. I'll show you one more time in the interests of brevity. thumbnail to get the paper flush up to the fretboard, and then at an angle cut your masking tape away like that, and then use the spare up higher. And doing it this way is both quicker and safer. While I am planning on selling a fretboard protector, one of those steel doohickeys, well, I need to redesign it so it's easier to use. I just don't find them particularly ergonomic. So this has been masked off. Now, these are stainless steel frets, and as such, you really do need to mask off the pickups. You don't want any filings getting into your pickups. You really don't want that. A lot of frets are nickel silver with varying amounts of steel in there, and they're not particularly magnetic, but these are magnetic. Now, let me get a permanent marker. Crimson. And I'm going to mark the top of each fret. Behold the beauty that is the Crimson Guitars fret leveler. This is perfectly flat. It's got a smooth cut, single cut file, and we even now make them with a truss rod so that they're perfectly flat. Now, the trick is to use this, and this is my personal one, so it's got my little monogram there, so nobody sells it. And speaking of selling them, you can buy them at crimsonguitars.com, and please do. So, the fret leveling file goes up and down, and all the way across before you concentrate on any particular spot. Now you can see how easily that is working. These are stainless steel frets, and this is perfect for those. And you can see that most of the frets are actually level. Well, let's try for a little bit of a... Except down at the end here, where you've got a few spots where you can still see the red permanent marker. And that means that, for example, that one there, that one is lower than those two. And that spot is lower than those two spots. You don't want to push too hard in the middle of the neck. You don't want to make it so that it's no longer flat. I'm being gentle. I'm not putting any pressure on anything really. It's literally just the weight of the tool. And even passes, trying not to hit your nut. Protect your nuts as if your life depended on it. For a second there, I almost forgot that I was bricking it about doing this. If one of these frets were loose, I would actually hear it. There would be a change in sound as the file goes over. It would sort of whisper. So you've got that noise and then a whisper where you've got a loose fret. But they all actually seem to be pretty spot on. Reapply your permanent marker so you can see exactly what's happening. And then it's time for a crowning file. This is a traditional Crimson Guitars. It is a traditional crowning file that we make here. Again, smooth cut and single cut file. Now what you need to do is run it evenly along the edge of the fret. Now this is taking longer than usual because this is a stainless steel fret. The nickel silver ones are a little bit harder. And what you're after is a straight line right down the middle of the fret that is about just a little bit less than a millimetre wide. And luckily we're not actually having to do all that much on these. Now what I'm not doing is rounding it over. I'm actually making a sort of pyramidal type shape. Let's say Aztec pyramid with a flat top. The final rounding over of it, that actually happens during the polishing process. So I've got my file at a constant angle, and I just go straight along. You can just see the silver lines down the side of each of those two frets on the end, and the red line in the middle is an even shape, just under a millimetre. 400 grit wet and dry paper, dry. Fold it over into 3 so it doesn't slip on itself, and it'll work rather well. And then wrap it around your finger. And this, because your finger is going in between each fret, that is rounding over the frets, and it is also getting rid of the scratch marks left by the file. Now I'm going to do this with various different grades of paper. What you want to do is 400 grit, then 600, and with the 600, start by going horizontal to the frets. And that way you'll see any scratches left by the 400 left. If you see any scratches going that way, then that means that those scratches are from the 400. After the fine sandpaper, I go 400 grit, 600 grit, and then it's on to the Crimson Guitars fret rubbers. This is the finer one. The coarse one I tend to use for spot repairs and that sort of stuff. This is about the equivalent to a 600 grit. This one's been bastardized. I tried cutting it in half to experiment. The joys of being a tool maker, you get to play around with tools. Anyway, this is an abrasive filled hard rubber that is excellent for polishing these frets. And if you want to go around the edges, do so like so. The final secret weapon. This is Autosol. It's a metal polish, and it's generally sold for people who have bikes with too much chrome on them. Oh, what am I saying? There's no such thing as too much chrome on a bike. And basically, polish away by hand. Now, if you see any scratches, as I'm actually starting to see here, you have to go back to an earlier grade. And I can still see a few scratches here from the 600 grit, I assume. So I'm going to need to go back. 600 grit? Yeah, probably 600 grit. I'm going to have to go back with my fret rubber and do a little bit more work. I have sit here and with elbow grease polished each fret. You can use a Dremel with a polishing mop, although I tend not to use machine tools anymore because they really do tend to take on a little bit too much work. I think doing it by hand just is more efficient. You can use jeweler's rouge and the like. Now if you pick that up from the edge, it lifts the corners of all of these up, and you just go away and you end up with a lovely clean fretboard and some perfectly leveled, perfectly shiny frets. Okay, I've got the new Crimson Guitars, where is that? There we go. Fretboard cleaner. Now this stuff is very, very gentle but incredibly effective. Drip it on the fretboard, and then basically, and it's just getting up any excess polish that's just gone down on the edges of the frets or any dirt or anything that was left in there. And I'm really proud of how this works. So that looks perfectly clean, but as you can see from the evidence, it is not. And as a side benefit, it also hydrates timber fretboards. In this case, not necessary, but what can you do? Let's get some strings on. We might need to replace these. So the one problem with locking spurtzels, taking them on and off again, is not generally successful if you don't have a length to play with. Well, here we are. This beautiful, incredibly lightweight instrument. Let's not drop our client's expensive guitar. She needs a little bit of a cleanup. The dust in our workshop is rather incredible and all pervasive. We've strung her up. She's in tune. She plays perfectly. We haven't actually changed. We haven't changed the customer's setup in any way. It's just back to being a lovely guitar. Now, basically the frets have been glued on. I suspect that they're going to stay glued on for a lot longer than they would have because they'd already started falling off. The whole reason we did this was because the client had had several delaminate and he wanted to stop that process before it went on any further. I honestly think that the only reason Parker make these frets this way is to be a little different and because they think, hey, it's cool. It doesn't add anything to the playability of the instrument. It doesn't add anything to the manufacturing. Hell, their cheap Far Eastern made instruments have got frets with standard normal tones. You know, if you're going to drastically change the design of a guitar, this is an instrument that's been around for 100 years plus, in its current form at least. If you're going to change something major about the way you build it, it has to be in order to improve the way it plays for the client, or the longevity of it for the client, or how easy it is for you to make, as long as it doesn't impact on the longevity and the playability. Now, you can't play a guitar where half the frets have fallen off in the case when you open it up. So longevity, it's just, and the longevity sucks because the frets are falling off. Now, the other thing is that I know these are particularly hard stainless steel frets. When it comes to refretting this guitar, somebody's going to have to either go to Parker and buy more of these frets from them, which is, you know, a good little racket, I suppose. They probably charge a premium for them. Or you're going to have to go and cut slots in a carbon fiber board that doesn't have slots in it already. And I think it's a bad idea. Now, I am a massive fan of Ken Parker, huge. His current crop of jazz guitars make me wet. I love them. I love what he does. This is a misstep. And it's a pity because it's cool. And I think that's the only reason why they do it. Because, hey, Parker glue their frets on. That's cool. But that doesn't outweigh the issues that it creates. Anyhow, you now know how I've gone about doing the, well, it's not a refret, technically, I think. It's a defret, refret with the original frets. What other guitar do you ever need to do that with, hey? Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to check out all of our other videos. We've got 180 plus on YouTube, plus another 50 or 60 or more videos for premium members of our guild at crimsonguitars.com, where there's also a forum where over 1,000 guitar builders talk about guitar building. and you can just check it all out. The guild membership basically pays for all of the YouTube videos and helps support and keeps it all coming. So I thank you very much for that. Don't forget to subscribe to YouTube as well.